Buffering. All right. Ricki, how are you, man? It is so good to have you. For the listeners on live, I just want you to know that I've already pre-recorded the intro. So if you want to hear all of that, you need to listen to the podcast. But Ricki, how are you, man? Glad to have you on here, and cannot wait for people to hear about Dr. Ricki Gibbs. So let's start off by telling us what's your story, man. Tell us about you.
Man, I appreciate you having me. Man, my story is one that people will say it's the story of the underdog, the story of the person that came from nothing, or as young Jeezy says, I used to have nothing, but now I have everything. And everything is, one of those things that could be taken different ways, but I just say I have a good life. Grew up humble beginnings in the middle of Miami. I grew up in a part of the city called Liberty City. Single parent household. Mom never made more than about $20,000 growing up. One of those poverty stories where my mom was physically and mentally abused by my dad. So I saw just a lot of anger and abuse growing up. And grew up in a very traumatic situation. Always got really good grades in school, but just always was that kid that was getting in trouble, being disrespectful, fighting, doing everything that I could do to show everyone something was going on with me. But back then, you're talking about the late 80s, early 90s, people wasn't really concerned with trauma-informed practices. It was, hey, this kid's in trouble, like this kid's doing stuff. We need to discipline him. Let's put him out of school. Let's call his mama. It was always just consequence. And no one ever really thought to talk to me. One of the turning points in my adolescent years growing up, I was in the 4th grade. I got into a fight with another student. Teacher did what she was supposed to do. She broke the fight up. But in the middle of breaking the fight up, I felt like she held me and let the other kid get a really good punch in on me. Got super upset. I picked up a chair, threw it at my teacher. And back then, well, I guess even now, throwing chairs at teachers is taboo. But I mean, it was real taboo then. And they moved to put me out of school for 180 days. Luckily, my mom worked her whole life, and she was a legal. She still is. She's still a legal secretary. And she was able to step in with the help of her boss. And instead of me getting put out of school, I was appointed anger management. So that was something that just kind of began. It was the first time I was able to go somewhere and talk to somebody who actually wasn't about judging me and talking about what actions I did at school, but really was like, what's going on with you? And that was the first time I started actually talking to someone. And then, things went back and forth for a little while. I had an amazing teacher in middle school, Tony Lassane, and he just showed me a different part of life, showed me that I didn't have to do certain things. I was able to begin to kind of really have conversations about just the bigger picture in life, and being a thinker taught me how to play chess. And it just put me on a different path. After that point, I graduated with honors in high school. Proudly a graduate of Tennessee State University, an HBCU located right here in Nashville, Tennessee. I got my undergrad and my master's from Tennessee State. I went on to get my doctorate in organizational leadership and strategic change from Lipscomb University. I taught 3rd grade for 4.5 years. I was an assistant principal for 5 years, and I've been an executive principal for 6 years. So it's something that I went from being that kid that was getting put out of school to the kid that's leading the school. And it helps inform just my thought process. And when people ask, why do I lead the way I lead? Why do I interact with people the way I do? It all becomes back to my story and how I grew up and what helped change my life. And I tell everyone, education is what changed my life. So that's why I'm so passionate about the practices that we use.
Isn't it interesting that they sent you to anger management which really sounds like de-escalation and therapeutic rapport. I mean, isn't that something that was what it was called? But really, it's what we're trying to accomplish as trauma-informed educators. It's really about not, what's wrong with a kid, but what's happened to them and what's going on. And so many times kids don't have the opportunity to actually express what happened or what's happening to them. It's like, you did this, you got to go. So tell us a little bit about the school you're leading right now. And then we're going to get into some of your work that you're currently leading, as well as some amazing podcasts that you are featured, as well as your school.
Yeah, so right now I have the honor and privilege, and I always frame it that way because it is truly a privilege to lead. I have the honor and privilege of leading the transformation work at Warner Arts Magnet Elementary, located in East Nashville, right here in Nashville, Tennessee. Warner has historically been a school that has struggled academically as well as socially. And when I took over, it was with the thought process of what can we do to truly make Warner the hub and heart and soul of the East Nashville community as it was in years past. Warner was originally built and opened in 1892. So you're talking about a school that's, over almost 130 years old, and has sat right there in the heart of town for over 100 years. So how can we revitalize that school and that community? You're talking about a school that in Tennessee, we use an accountability system where we look at student growth as well as student achievement. The school is on the priority list, meaning that we were in the bottom 5% of the state, but truly the school was in the bottom 1% of the state. The school had not only been single digit in proficiency, 3% proficient in numeracy, 5% proficient in literacy, but also level 1 in growth, meaning that not only were our students not achieving, they were not even growing as well. In a 2-year span, we've been able to significantly increase those outcomes. And as we dig into the conversation, I have people ask me all the time, Gibbs, what's the secret sauce? And there's a couple ingredients that you have to mix together to make that secret sauce. And as we have this conversation, I'm gonna share some of those ingredients. So as others seek to do this work, you can kind of make your own sauce as well. But we've been able to go from level 1 to level 5, which is the highest you can be in the state, as well as we're outpacing almost 90% of the schools in the state when we talk about growth and literacy and numeracy. So our educators are really pushing hard to get some amazing outcomes with our boys and girls.
Well, we know one of the secret ingredients because you talked about it on your podcast. It's Fabuloso. We know that. I mean, we know that's one of the ingredients because you spilled the beans. Hey,
that Fabuloso is critical when you're talking about just keeping stuff clean. Look, I tell it, man, those bathrooms, for all my educators that are listening, y'all know what I'm saying. When you walk past those bathrooms and you that smell, just you like, hold on, what are y'all doing in there? Like, bathrooms shouldn't smell like that. But if your custodians use that Fabuloso, just put a little bit in that soap water, man, you walk by, it just smells clean. And that's what my babies deserve.
That's right. And so what I'm referring to is one of the episodes of the podcast that has featured Warner East Nashville, as well as Dr. Gibbs. He refers to the power of Fabuloso and keeping a building clean. And I'm going to tell you a very quick, fast little story. When our kids arrive, we greet them at the door. And I swear to you, Dr. Gibbs, I opened up a car door, and in the floorboard, like a glistening diamond, says Fabuloso. And I wanted to grab that bottle so bad and say, can I have this, please? I did not. However, let's get into this podcast that you've been on. And I'm going to be honest, I was holding on every week for the next episode because it was remarkable. It was remarkably done. The content is really, really important. So just give a little overview of The Promise, which is that podcast.
Yeah, so the Promise is written and produced by Maribel Knight. She's a local reporter with WPLN, our local Nashville public radio, which falls under the umbrella of NPR. And with The Promise season 2, Maribel took a deep look at the children of Casey, and Casey is the largest public housing subdivision in Nashville, as well as just the East Nashville community. In season 1, she actually takes a deep dive into public housing, which sets the stage. And then in season 2, she looks at how that public housing impacts the lives of the children that live in the public housing. And one of the things that she uncovered, and I saw it as soon as I got to Warner a couple years ago. Warner sits in the middle of a zip code sits in the middle of zip code 37206. That zip code is 66% white, but Warner historically has been 98% black. So I'm gonna say those numbers again because it's mind-boggling when you hear it. A zip code that's 66% white has a school that's 98% black. And then a mile down the street, you have another elementary school that was 98% white. And you start having these conversations like, how is this possible in a city that's so diverse and a part of town that loves diversity? And you're talking about there's LGBTQ pride, there's all kind of diversity, like people just get together and love on each other in this part of town. So it's mind-boggling that we would have what in the educational field we call subgroup isolation. But Maribel pointed out quickly, like, let's stop beating around the bush. Let's not call subgroup isolation. Let's call it what it is. It's segregation. And we basically have segregated schools. And why is this happening? Like in a part of town that says it believes in diversity and what's best for all students. Like, why is this happening? So we were able to. She uncovered a lot of things, but it also talked that the Promise season 2 looks at our turnaround story. So not only the turnaround story of looking at how we've transformed the school, be it academically as well as socially, looks at some of the programming that we've put in place, because that's one of the most exciting parts. You have a school that's started off 98% black, not 100% economically disadvantaged. And normally when you have schools like that, especially that's on the state priority list, and you're talking about the discipline, the trauma, the lack of academic outcomes, the first thing they do is say, let's take away the arts programming and just give them more time to work on reading, more time to work on math. And what I told everyone was, if my babies are already bored with 2 hours of literacy and an hour of math, if we make literacy 3 hours and make math 2 hours, now you're just giving them more nap time because they're already bored. We have to do something to begin to excite them, to get them hooked into this process. So The Promise covers that, and it just shows how that work was started. It shows how that work was implemented. And then it also, one of the most powerful phrases that you hear in the story, and I've had to talk about it multiple times, is the school can't survive without recruiting the white children in the area. And one of the things I heard was, man, Gibbs, like, you're a 6 foot, 250 pound black man. Like, how are you gonna let that fly when somebody say your school can't survive without white kids? And what I tell everyone is, you have to look at the bigger picture. Don't let the shock value take you away from the bigger picture. What we're saying when we say that is, Warner had already been 98% black in that community. Pretty much, if you have a black child that's zoned for Warner, 90% of those babies come to us. Like, they are already there. But we have another group of white and Hispanic children that are zoned for us that are not coming to us. So when we say we need them, absolutely, we need them to increase enrollment, to keep that lifeblood flowing in the school, because ultimately what we need is we need our boys and girls to grow up and seeing what diversity really looks like, right? So we need the Black boys and girls that live in Casey who median household income is $12,000. We need them to know that not everybody lives like this. Not everybody lives paycheck to paycheck, or not everybody goes to the supermarket or goes to Kroger or Publix and swipes an EBT card. But then we also need our children that are coming from more affluent homes to know not everybody gets everything that they want. Like not everybody can say, well, I just go to the store and I want this, and that, and their parents can get it. So it's one that by bringing the whole community together, we see that true diversity that, East Nashville is really known for, that'll truly grow the school. So if you haven't sat down and listened to The Promise Season 2, definitely a must listen by Maribel Knight.
And it's not just an opinion of that we feel, right? The New Yorker has labeled it as one of the top 10 best podcasts in 2020. I mean, that speaks volumes. And Ricki, I've got to bring up one. I'm sorry, Dr. Gibbs. I'm not gonna lie, Ricki and I talk all the time. We're friends, so I'm gonna call him Ricki. But
my mama named me Ricki. You can call me Ricki.
I appreciate it. But the thing that stuck out to me, Ricki, is that there was a moment in which there was a community meeting where it got kind of heated a bit, and somebody was talking negatively about your school that was not a parent at your school. And you so bravely and proudly stood up and was like, hold on a minute now. And you stood up for the core beliefs of your school, the children that enter your school, the value that every kid brings. Tell me about that moment, and where did that courage come from in such an intensely driven meeting?
Yeah. So, and the funny thing is, when I was invited to that meeting, I came just to listen. Like I had no intention on speaking. I had texted the other principal, Christy Lewis, and I got to tell people, Christy's my buddy. She's doing amazing work at Laughlin. Like she's really pushing that school forward. And I told Christy, hey, save me a seat. Like I'm gonna be sitting right next to you. I'm just coming to listen. Like I'm focused on the work that we need to do, but like I'm not understanding what all the conversation was. I tell people I fault myself. I just wasn't educated in the politics of all the things that was surrounding education in the area. And when I was sitting there and I just heard somebody just going on about, well, why isn't Warner doing this? Why isn't Warner doing that? I was like, well, hold on. Excuse me. I'm Ricki Gibbs. I'm the principal. I got up and gave my spiel, but I'm like, hold on. You can't say what we're not doing because I'm there every day and I've never seen you. Like you've never stepped foot in this building. You don't know the academic outcomes. You only know the stuff that you've heard from years past. You don't know the life-changing work that has been happening. What they knew was a couple years ago, the school is 200 some odd students, and it logged almost 800 disciplinary referrals. It knew that 2 years running back to back, teachers quit in the middle of a school year, and students were left to be educated by subs. Like those were the stories that people heard, but they hadn't dug into what was reality of the now. They were living in the past. So one of the things I used that moment to educate them on what was the reality of the now. And one of the things that we had a conversation about was I introduced the whole community to our partnership with Be Well in Schools. And that's a partnership that has totally shifted. It works perfect. It was a true paradigm shift of the school as we dug into the work, because our partnership with Be Well, we introduced our boys and girls to the power of the breath, the power of mindfulness, and the power of childhood yoga. And that was a true game changer for us because it taught our boys and girls how to self-regulate. One of the things that I tell people all the time, it's a quote by Charlemagne the God, and he talks about we have a community that makes permanent decisions based upon temporary emotions. And that's what school behavior is all about. When we start talking about, why did the child do that? Well, they made a decision based upon a temporary emotion, but as adults, are we going to make this a permanent decision, or are we going to give them a way to deal with it?
And Ricki, let's be honest. You were in the training I was in a couple weeks ago, right? And it was about behavior, and it was about what is the function of the behavior. And this is a big controversy in trauma-informed education versus behavioralist mindset of what was the function of the behavior. Were they trying to escape something? Were they trying to get attention? And, when you say that, it brought me back to this moment where the facilitator ended up taking us into a private small group, and we were discussing, and I gave her a scenario, and I said, so here's the scenario. You tell me what the function is. And I said, this child is laying in the floor. It literally happened that morning, Ricki, and you know it because you have to help co-regulate and support kids every day. Yep. Laying in the floor, crying, refusing to come into class. The teacher texted me. I have a great relationship with the student. And she said, can you help me? I went and got her. I had her come into my office. We did this find it game to de-escalate her. I got her down and I said, what's wrong? And she said, my mom and I are about to get kicked out of our apartment. Okay. Actually, a hotel. It wasn't even an apartment. When I said that to this person, said, what's the function of this child's behavior? I could see a blank. The function is she's about to be homeless. She knows it, and she's freaking out, right? Why wouldn't we? And I think what you just said really fits into so many schools, right? Of compliance and kids have to do what we told them to do. But when you talk about Be Well, and I'm gonna tell everybody that's listening, I'm stealing Be Well. They're coming over to my school after watching you. I think we share a lot of good ideas, and that was one that you shared with me. But talk about that power of teaching regulation, of co-regulation, where they have the Be Well facilitator to help get them calm and come up. Tell about that process because it is remarkable.
Yeah, so it's a double-sided process. So if a teacher sees a child that's antsy or just has whatever, something's going on that day, they just seem like they're not their normal selves. Trauma comes in different forms. It can be a child that's acting out, or you somebody like me that's always hyper, high energy, and I seem extremely withdrawn that day. So I don't ever want anybody to think that, it's always about acting out. It's totally not. It's about just really being keen on behavior. And so the teacher can refer to that space, but the power of the program is that children can refer themselves to that space as well. And that's something that we've been able to really dig into. I'll hit you with a powerful story that really pushes it home. We had a child that was in one of our related arts specialist classes, growing in the arts, and she was having an off day. And I got a call at the call on the radio, said, hey, Dr. Gibbs, this student is having a tantrum. Please come to the classroom. I went to the classroom and I removed the child from the class, brought her to my office and was like, hey, what was going on? She was like, well, I asked to go to the Be Well room and the teacher told me no. And I was like, well, what do you mean she told you no? And we're having this conversation because we've talked about in staff meetings before, hey, if a child asks to go, you let them go. And so I continue to debrief with the child. She tells me what was going on. I said, okay. So I walked the child up to the Be Well room to let the child handle what they need to handle. But then after that, once the class dismissed, I went and talked to the teacher. And I was having a conversation with this educator. And I was like, hey, tell me what happened. And the educator told me, hey, Dr. Gibbs, she went to the Be Well room for 15 minutes at the beginning of class because she walked in just having an off day. She came back, she started doing her work, and then she started asking to go to the Be Well room again. And I told her no. I was like, well, why'd you tell her no? She was like, because we were trying to finish a project and I needed everybody to do their project. So, but then she started tantruming. So I said, okay, well, now you wanted everybody to do their project. How many people were able to finish their project? She said, nobody, because she started having a tantrum, kicking and screaming and doing all this stuff. And I said, exactly. So you wanted 100%, but you ended up getting 0% because you wouldn't let one go handle what they need to handle. And it's a thought process. And I tell everybody, I'm a true believer in all means all. I want all children to receive a world-class education, but it looks different for some. And one of the conversations that I had with this educator was like, well, Dr. Gibbs, don't you think that she's taking advantage of the system by trying to go to Be Well multiple times? I said, absolutely, she's taking advantage of the system, but not in how you're thinking. She's taking advantage of the system because we're one of the only schools in the country where a child can say, hey, something's not going on right in my world, and I need to go self-regulate. I need to just step away and breathe and get myself back calm, and then I'll be back to do my work. But I need to take care of me first. And this is a concept that we've been able to really kind of just get into action, because it's one that you have to let students take care of their own needs before they're able to do the things that we need them to do as educators and as adults. And just going through that situation, man, it was an eye-opening conversation and an eye-opening experience for all of us, because again, and it's something that I tell people all the time. It's funny to hear people say, well, if they step out of class for 15 minutes, aren't you afraid they won't get their work done? If they stay in that class for 15 minutes, they're gonna just disrupt everybody and nobody's gonna get their work done. And part of it is what we found out by having that conversation with the child when she needed to go back. That morning, she had got into it with her mom. Her mom told her that she didn't want her no more. She was gonna call DCS, that's the Department of Children's Services, and just let somebody else raise her. So her mind wasn't on school, but she knew at school she had a safe place to go to deal with those issues. But as educators, sometimes we step in front of it and not understanding that if we have structures in place to let children deal with that type of trauma, that type of anxiety, we need them to deal with that first. But that was one of those learning steps. And just by having that partnership with Be Well, man, we can dig into different situations that we've been able to go through that has been life-changing, world-changing for our students. And I tell people, again, that's one of the ingredients in that secret sauce. How do you turn around a school? How do you transform a school? You have to put supports in place for not only educators, but also for your boys and girls, that they can truly have that paradigm shift of thought process, have that paradigm shift in culture, but also have that paradigm shift in support, so that they can know that they can take care of their own needs and then dig into the needs of the academics.
And, I think something that I found in this work as well is you have to support the adults in the very similar to same way, right? And I think the one piece that always resonates in trauma-informed education is, well, there's no accountability. Kids can do whatever they want. That's not even close. Matter of fact, I've even written an article for Edutopia about it. That doesn't mean there's not consequences. It doesn't mean that they don't have to fix something when they rip it off of the wall. But that also goes with the adults, right? Like we support our adults as much as we support our kids, because in my opinion, Ricki, and I think you share it too, it's really about the adults. It's about changing our paradigm, because the kids have always came in with trauma. Kids have always came in with things that we may never comprehend, or some of us have been through. And at the end of the day, it is making sure we're in that space as administrators, not just for the kids, but equally for the adults as well. So talk about the culture, because I don't know if you know this, but one of my teachers said, hey, you know what Gibbs teacher said about him? I said, what? He said, he is so hard, but he loves you so much. And I think I was like, that describes him perfectly. So talk about that. What is your expectation for staff, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so man, I tell people all the time, we're simple to the point, but it's not as simple as it seems. When people talk about high expectations, it's kind of cliche in education, but I tell my team all the time, I trust them as trained professionals. Everybody on my staff is a trained professional. And as such, I'm going to hold you accountable for everything that we say that we're going to do. But the inverse is true as well. I want you to hold me accountable for everything that I tell you that I'm going to support you in doing. So when we say that, when we talk about school culture, nobody in my building works for me. Even though I'm the principal, I'm the leader, nobody works for me. I work for everybody in my building. So that starts with my custodians, cafeteria workers, paraprofessionals, teachers. I work for them. So the culture is built upon me finding ways to support them to be successful. And if they fail at their job, that means I failed at my job because I haven't done my role in helping them be successful. But in that, talking about being successful, I'm going to create an atmosphere that where we can all have trust as well as open and honest conversation, because I'll tell everyone, I don't teach any of our mindfulness practices. I don't teach nobody how to read. I don't teach anybody how to do any numeracy. That's not my role. When I was a third grade teacher, absolutely, I did all that stuff, but that's not my role right now. So because that's not my role is to make sure that the structures are in place to ensure that everyone on my team can do their work. So I when I played football, I played fullback. And my job as fullback was to take on any linebackers to ensure the tailback had a free run. I look at this work the same way. I'm a bulldozer. I knock down any barriers that's in front of my team's way so that they can do their work and do their work at a high level. Any red tape, I take care of the tape. I don't want anybody on my team dealing with any of that because I want them extremely focused on what they need to do for their boys and girls. And again, that took me as the leader having a paradigm shift and just the shift in my thinking because I had to learn that it wasn't about me. It was about what's the greater good for my scholars, for my babies, about them getting a great education. Because like I tell people, Ricki Gibbs is a 37-year-old Black male with a doctorate. I can work anywhere in the country. Some of my babies, the statistics say some of them may not graduate from high school. So like their story is still not written. So we have to make sure that, and that's part of our expectation, is how can we continue to speak life into our students to make sure that we're removing every roadblock. And part of that shift as far as being a leader, I remember part of dealing and digging into this work when we're talking about school culture and trauma-informed practices. I was that principal that always told my teachers, before a child does anything that can get them suspended from school, I want you to call me and let me come to the classroom and let me de-escalate them. And it wasn't until I went down this path with Be Well that I told myself, man, like Ricki, that's almost a real self-righteous concept. Like nobody can handle it but you. You let me come in and do it. And one thing that I realized quickly, I increased the level of anxiety for everybody in the building, no matter what. So I tell people, think about it. If you're or even as educators, you're a teacher in the classroom, you make a mistake. It's not the principal that talks to you about the mistake. It's the director of schools, your superintendent, that person comes. That's how children feel when the principal comes to talk to them, even though I meant nothing but good by it, but I increased the level of anxiety by doing that. So by taking myself out of the equation and truly trusting the people that I've hired to do their job and do their job well, man, we've been able to accelerate all of the decrease in out-of-school suspension, decrease in student disciplinary referrals, increase in academics, increase in teacher morale, increase in teacher satisfaction, increase in community partnerships, because I decided, you know what? I'm going to trust everybody that's on my team that they are a trained professional. And Part two of the secret sauce, that extra ingredient, institutional trust. As the leader, you must have trust that you can remove any roadblocks so that your people can run their race and run it as fast as they can. When we talk about that, I like to refer to one of the greatest philosophers to ever live. And I mean, he's written all kind of similes, metaphors that'll just change your mind. His name is Dwayne Carter. If you've never heard of him, you should definitely look him up. He also goes by the name of Lil Wayne or Weezy F Baby, and he's one of the greatest rappers to ever live. And he had a line that says, "I'm not racing, I'm just sprinting." And that's the thought process. When we talk about school culture, and if you're gonna do this work, it's not about racing. So like, we're not in competition with anybody, but because the work we're doing is so critical, it's such a life-changing process, we must be sprinting. And that's how we dig into the work.
And that's powerful, Ricki, because the way our education system, and I don't mean the one we work for, I'm talking about the large education system of the US, is all based in competition. It's all based on me trying to outperform you, trying to outperform so that we're not in the Isn't it amazing that when you push that aside and you focus on the intensity of what we're trying to accomplish, which is give boys and girls the best and highest quality education they can possibly get, while also teaching and supporting their social and emotional health, that competition goes away. And I think your phrase that you use all the time is iron sharpens iron when we're sharing ideas and when we're collaborating with some of our colleagues. That's what is going to make education shift. It's not that what I'm doing is secret and I don't want you to know because I'm having a success. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of school administrators operate. And then there's one other thing that I connected to that you said, and it was on a social media post in this large principal group, and I put a quote on there that said, "This isn't the year to decide that whether you're a great principal or not," or something like that, right? Yeah. And the teacher came on and just started typing this long text about how her administrators micromanaging and how they're not supporting and how they're, and man, did it just, I sat back and I sat with it for a minute and went, I can't imagine being in a school. I can't imagine being a principal that's micromanaged, right? What you said is empowerment. It's building capacity of your educators to do what you hired them to do and trust them to do it by moving all of those barriers out of the way. And I think your teachers are probably saying amen right now, because I know about them and I know that's what you truly do. And so what do you see for Warner in the next 3 to 5 years? What do you see in your vision as an administrator leading this amazing little school in East Nashville?
Man, right off the back is we want that reward status banner hanging out there. And it's funny, before we went through this pandemic, and a lot of you know that we had a tornado right before we went out of school for the pandemic. We had been tracking to do something that hadn't been done in education in a very long time. We were going from priority to reward status in a year's time. And it was one that by every educational metric that we were taking, we were on track to do just some amazing things. So to break it down for you, every school has what's called the AMO, the annual measurable objective. So it's basically a goal for every school, and every school has a double goal. So to make it make sense, Warner, at this point, we were at 9% success rate. So our goal for the school year was to get to 16%. Our double goal was, maybe like 21% or 19% or something like that. We were on track to not, and if most schools struggle to hit their goal, and if you hit your double goal, that's amazing in education. We were on track to double our double AMO. So not only were we on track to hit the double one, we were actually on track to go from a 9% success rate to almost a 45% success rate which is unheard of in education. We take an assessment in Nashville, a MAP assessment administered by NWEA, and we have certain growth goals that we look to hit. And obviously, I can give a shout out to Fall Hamilton because they hit both of their growth goals in reading and numeracy as well. And only less than 20 schools hit both of them, but we actually were the #1 school of over 100 schools in Nashville in numeracy of hitting these growth goals. So we were just all kind of amazing momentum. So we definitely see some amazing outcomes academically coming for our boys and girls. But part of the sustainability over the next 3 to 5 years, we're definitely looking at how can we continue to attract and retain amazing educators, as well as attract and retain new families to continue to diversify our school, which is going to be critical to the school's success. Part of that diversification is also engaging with the community, and how can we continue to engage our community businesses to invest in the school, to support in the school. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to some of the folks who have been on the front end of investing and entrusting in the school to ensure that the school has certain business partnerships to do things outside of the school's budget and things that just helps move the school forward. We're likely to partner with Sky Blue Cafe that sits right there off of Fatherland. Lachlan Table that sits in the heart of East Nashville.
I know who owns that business. She used to work at a school I work. That's awesome to hear. I didn't know that. Nice.
Yeah. So with Sky Blue Cafe, we have Lachlan Table that sits right there in East Nashville, and also Bongo Java, the coffee shop that's in East Nashville. So you're talking about 3 establishments that not only go over and beyond if we need something to just incentivize our teachers, because as educators, we know, man, if somebody brings us some coffee and some pastries, look, we appreciate that. Like it's the little things that show your appreciation in life. But these companies and organizations have just stepped up and said, hey, we're going to wrap our arms around the school and just show you that this community loves on this school, loves on the babies that you serve, and also, and more importantly, loves on the educators that are going forth and doing the hard work, life-changing work every single day. So we want you to know that, hey, we support you. So as we talk about the next 3 to 5 years, that's our goals, to continue with the academic outcomes, continue with the social emotional work that we're doing in our trauma-informed practices, because teaching our babies how to self-regulate, this is bigger than just learning numeracy and literacy. Teaching babies how to self-regulate, this is life-changing, because when they become adults, they no longer will make those permanent decisions based upon a temporary emotion. I'm not going to ride down the street, you blow your horn at me, I'm going to get out my car and do something, and now I got to go to jail for 10 years. I've learned how to self-regulate, so I'm going to take my breath, I'm going to do some of my mindfulness practices, and I'm going to say, hey, man, have a nice day. It's just a different mindset, and if we teach our students and our scholars this stuff at a young age, they won't grow up to adults that make those permanent decisions.
And Ricki, I think a powerful piece is that this isn't just kids that go to Warner, right? That need this. No. I needed this. Obviously, we both needed it. I spent a little time out of school myself, right? And at the end of the day, I think the power of trauma-informed education is it's not about a demographic of kid. It's not about the kids that live in the projects. It's not about the kids that live in the trailer park. It's not about the kids that live in the most affluent area. It's about all kids. These are real world experiences, or what Miss Davis Boyer here said, real world learning, right? It's real world learning to prepare you for life. It's great if you have all of those ELA reading skills and those great mathematics skills, but if you can't self-regulate and you can't understand what your body does when it's feeling emotions that become out of control, it doesn't matter what what you've learned. At the end of the day, it's about the power of regulation to be able to use all of those academic tools that every kid needs. I mean, it gets me fired up, obviously. So, man, I cannot believe it's already been 45 minutes, which is, we may have to have segment 2 because I think we could talk for days. But the one thing that I ask every guest on the podcast is, what do you want educators to know? Not just educators at Warner, but all educators that listen to this, because it is listened to in 50 different countries by thousands of people. So what do you want them to know from Dr. Ricki Gibbs?
Man, as we close out this one, and again, if we want to do a part 2, I'll love to tap back in and do that. But for all my educators that are listening, if you don't remember anything else that I tell you, remember these words: your work matter, and you matter. You can't do this life-changing work that we do in education if you don't take care of yourself. So self-care, time to reflect, time to decompress, and time to just enjoy you and the people that love you matters. Because as we continue to do this life-changing work, it's something that it can become hard on you. And it's something that will continue to press and press and press. So make sure that you take care of yourself. And again, I'll say that phrase again, because if you remember nothing else, I want you to remember these simple words: your work matters, but more importantly, you matter. Take care of yourself so you can take care of others and continue changing lives through the power of a great education.
Man, I mean, that's it. And, Stephen Covey said, you have to take care of your greatest asset, you. Like, we have to. And I don't think that's just the teachers out there. That's also the administrators listening. We're all in this together. This is all hard work. And at the end of the day, Ricki, you and I display great self-care. I do not mind disconnecting. I do not mind getting on my boat or going to my cabin. I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me. That's how I know I can sustain the work that I do. And I hope that other people take that same stance. So if people want to follow you on social media, Ricki, where can they find you?
On Twitter, I am Principal_Gibbs. So PRIN CIPAL_GIBBS. And on Instagram, I'm Principal_Gibbs and then the number 2. So you can follow me on both of those. And if you ever just needed to get in contact with me, my direct email is Ricki, RICKI .Gibbs, GIBBS at MNPS.org, MaryNancyPeterSam.org. If you wanted to just reach out to me directly.
And if you reach out to me, I'll give you his personal cell phone number. But if you want to follow if you want to follow me, please check out my work on Twitter, which is at Principal List, and the same on Instagram. I'm Matthew Portell on Facebook, or you can follow Paradigm Shift Education, Trauma Informed Educators Network, or the Trauma Informed Educators Network podcast. Ricki, I can't thank you enough. And to all the listeners here, as I say every time, thank you for listening. And please, please, please wash your hands and wear a mask. All right, Ricki, we're still live on social media. However, I have stopped the podcast recording. So if I stop this recording, then you go away and I can't say bye. So
no worries. No worries.
Like we got some people thanking you for everything that you have done and being a champion, which is super awesome. And man, thank you for being on here. We may actually have to do another one. And we may dig into some principal self-care stuff, because I think that is a conversation that isn't happening enough. And I think it needs to happen. For some reason, principals think if I can't handle it, they're going to get somebody to replace me. And I don't think that's really how that works. No. So, man, thank you. I appreciate it. I'll be texting you later, and I'll talk to you later.
All right. Catch you later.